Tonight, we uncover a story buried beneath centuries of faith, a rivalry older than any religion, and a secret that may change everything we think we know about divine power. They say the walls of Rome hold every secret, but some are buried far deeper, sealed behind doors thick enough to muffle the prayers of entire generations. And as you walk through the dim Vatican corridors tonight, you feel the quiet resistance of a place that has survived plagues, emperors, wars, and at least 3 popes who probably should have retired earlier than they did. You breathe in that old stone smell, the one that somehow blends incense, dust, and the faint floral sweetness of whatever perfume clings to cardinals who pretend they don't wear perfume. And you sense that tonight's journey is not simply about a vision received by 3 shepherd children in Fatima over a century ago, but about something that spiraled so far beyond them that even the Church, an institution proud of its love affair with control, couldn't quite contain it. You take another step, feeling the marble cool beneath your feet, and the magnitude of this secret tightens its grip around your thoughts, because this is the third secret, the censored one, the version whispered behind locked doors and politely omitted from press conferences. And you, for reasons none of us fully understand, are now wandering straight toward it even though you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because nothing bonds a sleepy global audience faster than realizing someone else is also lying awake at 3:17 a.m. wondering what the Vatican isn't telling them. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, because the corridors bend sharply now, leading you deeper toward a restricted wing you definitely weren't cleared to enter. Though to be fair, a surprising number of Vatican doors don't latch properly. A guard walks by with a sleepy nod, giving you the kind of look that suggests he's thinking about espresso, but would welcome an existential crisis if it meant staying awake. And you slip past him toward an ornate wooden door carved with biblical scenes so dramatically rendered that even the cherubs look like they could use therapy. Behind this door lies the first hint of the real third secret, the one the Vatican officially released in 2000, the one involving a bishop in white walking through a ruined landscape. Yet historians, theologians, conspiracy theorists, and that one guy at your uncle's barbecue all agree that something about the released text feels incomplete, as if an essential page, accidentally, fell into a fireplace back in 1959. You push the door gently, and it opens with the sort of theatrical creak that would make a horror film editor chuckle approvingly. And you enter a chamber lined with cabinets older than most countries. One mainstream historical fact immediately echoes into the space. Sister Lucia, the surviving Fatima visionary, did indeed meet with multiple popes, each receiving her handwritten accounts, which is impressive considering most people can't even get their dentist to return a phone call. But here's the fringe tidbit that refuses to die. Some believe Sister Lucia wrote 2 versions of the third secret, one spiritual and symbolic, the other so catastrophically straightforward that it could allegedly destabilize the world. Though that description sounds suspiciously like someone had been reading too many melodramatic Cold War thrillers. You move deeper between the cabinets, fingers brushing against metal handles chilled by centuries of silence, and feel the weight of the open scholarly debate phrase that continues to inflame historians. The text we received may not represent the full content originally recorded. Some argue that symbolism is enough, that visions should be interpreted, not feared, while others insist that the missing portion contains political predictions, eschatological warnings, or perhaps an unsettling reference to human behavior needing major improvement before the next century rolls around. You notice a file box slightly ajar, its label faded to a ghostly whisper of ink, and because curiosity has always been humanity's favorite bad decision, you pull it open. Inside, you find a stack of parchment documents covered in looping handwriting, vibrant and intense, as though the writer had no time to breathe between lines. You lean closer and catch the faint scent of old ink and beeswax, a reminder of the era when writing something important required both patience and the willingness to ruin several shirts in the process. Your eyes skim a few words: visions, fire, a city falling, and though you can't read the full text, The dread curling through your stomach feels like someone has just taken all your childhood nightmares, blended them together, and added a dramatic Vatican twist. You hear footsteps outside the door and freeze, pressing yourself against a cabinet decorated with an alarming number of trumpet-blowing angels. The steps fade. Someone probably just went to find a biscotti, and you breathe again, remembering that in another story, another night, you encountered ancient Egyptian crocodile dung sunscreen, and somehow that felt less unsettling than whatever is unfolding now. You move toward a small desk where a single candle flickers, even though candles aren't supposed to be left burning in archival rooms. But you're past expecting sensible behavior tonight, and you see a journal bound in soft, cracked leather. You open it to reveal a brief description of the 1917 Fatima apparitions, written by a long-retired cleric who had apparently never met a metaphor he didn't like. But near the bottom in smaller, frantic handwriting is a note claiming that the true Third Secret speaks of a global trial not limited to nations, but to souls. The phrasing tingles at the back of your mind, like a warning dressed in poetry, and you understand now why the Vatican might have gently nudged this text into permanent obscurity. You look up, suddenly aware of how quiet the room has become, how heavy the air feels, as if the very walls are waiting for you to turn the page. And you do, knowing that whatever you find next will deepen this mystery, will pull you further into a narrative the world was never meant to read. But still you keep going, because the human brain loves a forbidden story almost as much as it loves carbohydrates. The candle flickers again, casting long shadows that stretch across the cabinet doors like reaching fingers, and you take one last breath before your journey into the censored heart of Fatima truly begins. You step out of the chamber with the candle still trembling behind you, and the hallway feels even colder now, as if the Vatican itself is exhaling in disapproval, its ancient walls muttering that you should have stopped at the gift shop and minded your own business like everyone else. But you keep walking, tracing the polished stone corridor toward the deeper, more restricted part of the apostolic archives, a place where only a small, carefully curated handful of archivists hold keys, figuratively and literally. And these are the people whispered about in clerical circles with the same mixture of awe and suspicion ordinarily reserved for relatives who keep too many porcelain dolls. You descend a narrow staircase, spiraling beneath the palace foundation, your hand brushing along a railing that feels smoother than it should, as if centuries of anxious clergymen had worn it down during late-night crises. When your foot lands on the final step, you enter a subterranean hall lined with iron gates, each one marking a collection of artifacts, documents, and testimonies that never quite made it into the public narrative. The archivists here aren't robed mystics or huddled monks chanting in dim corners, just tired scholars with spectacles, cardigans, and the emotional aura of people who have read far too many apocalyptic manuscripts before breakfast. One of them glances at you as she carries an armful of files, offering a polite nod that suggests she assumes you belong here, which is comforting until you realize that people who work in secret archives rarely assume anything good. You slip past her and enter a reading room where tall lamps cast soft pools of golden light over long wooden tables, and the quiet here is so absolute that even your breath feels like an intruder. On one of the tables rests a register filled with access logs, tiny signatures cramped into uneven lines. You notice dates stretching back decades, and among them, one mainstream historical fact whispers its presence. Pope John XI did indeed read the Third Secret shortly after his election in 1958, and according to several accounts, he closed the envelope quietly, saying the message did not apply to his time. Scholars love repeating that moment because it is both enigmatic and deliciously dramatic, exactly the sort of behavior that keeps historians gainfully employed. A flicker of movement catches your gaze, and an elderly archivist shuffles into the room, wearing slippers that seem far too comfortable for a high-security environment. He doesn't speak, but deposits a stack of aged documents onto a side table, then retreats with the weary resignation of someone who knows he is outnumbered by paper. You approach the documents, noticing a soft scent of cedarwood rising from them, and lift the top page, revealing a translation draft of the Fatima accounts from the 1940s. The handwriting varies wildly, from elegant cursive to the chaotic scrawl of someone who wrote their notes in a carriage moving over cobblestones. And you can't help imagining how many clerics argued over commas while ignoring the enormous cosmic implications. Your eyes land on a curious marginal note circled 3 times, reading, "An alternate interpretation exists but is discouraged." And if that doesn't scream Catholic subtlety, nothing does. This is where the fringe tidbit creeps in like an uninvited guest at a quiet dinner party. Some archivists over the decades have allegedly shared rumors of a redacted within the redaction document, meaning not only was part of the third secret withheld, but even the withheld part had its own withheld part, a kind of theological Russian nesting doll that practically begs for popcorn and speculation. You can't verify the claim, of course, but the archivist's slippers in the hallway somehow make it feel more plausible than it should. You run your fingers along the translation pages and feel a faint indentation beneath the ink, as though the writer pressed too hard while forming certain words, perhaps overwhelmed by whatever images were dancing in their imagination, and you realize that even the most mundane-looking documents here hum with tension. All around you, the tables bear traces of frantic annotation, ink smudges, corrections, and the occasional doodle of what might be a lamb or might be someone's attempt to draw a cloud after too much espresso. But it's the silence that presses hardest against you, a silence thickened by secrecy and the quiet echo of that open scholarly debate phrase you've heard before yet still hangs unresolved. The published vision does not correspond to all early testimonies. Some scholars argue this politely at conferences, citing inconsistencies and deeply furrowed eyebrows. Others argue it less politely on blogs written at 2 in the morning. The archivists here, however, treat the discrepancy like someone treats an eccentric relative, acknowledging it, accommodating it, and choosing not to bring it up in front of guests. You sit down at one of the tables, the wood warm beneath your palms, and open a folder stamped with a red marking that looks suspiciously like someone dipped a finger in wax and hoped no one would notice. Inside is a letter from a bishop who visited Sister Lucia in the early 1960s. The front of the letter is full of pleasantries about health and weather, but the back contains a hurried assessment of the visionary's emotional state. It mentions fear, gravity, and her repeated insistence that the message concerned a great spiritual struggle, though that phrasing is vague enough that it could apply to either global catastrophe or trying to assemble furniture from a Swedish company. You flip through more documents and find a report describing the storage procedure for the envelope containing the third secret, noting that it was kept first in the bishop's residence, then transferred to the Vatican under strict protocol. The fact that the envelope moved locations at all adds another layer to the mystery, because important things rarely get moved unless someone is uneasy about where they're sitting. As you keep reading, you feel again the quiet thrill that brought you here, the irresistible magnetism of forbidden knowledge, the gravitational pull of a narrative shaped by fear, reverence, and a kind of cosmic curiosity that no institution, no matter how powerful, can perfectly contain. You remember the flickering candle upstairs, its flame bending like it was trying to whisper a warning, and you realize that everything around you, the papers, the archivists, the carefully controlled access, suggest that this archive is less a library and more a living organism guarding itself. You shift in your seat, the chair creaking a little too loudly, and several archivists glance in your direction with expressions that say, "Please don't knock over anything older than France." You offer a small, apologetic smile and close the folder gently, then look up at the nearest lamp. It's like trembling slightly, as if unsure whether to illuminate or obscure what you've just been reading. You stand, sliding the chair quietly back into place, and you feel the story thickening around you, tightening like the leather binding of a book that has been closed too long. Somewhere beyond this room lies the next layer of truth, the deeper vaults where the most controversial accounts are stored, the ones seldom requested and even more seldom answered. You take a slow breath and step toward the gated corridor ahead, your footsteps echoing faintly, your pulse beating in time with the soft hum of the lamps, and you know, without needing anyone to confirm it, that the censored version of the third secret is not waiting in a tidy envelope with a polite note attached. No, it lives in whispers, half-erased testimonies, panicked marginalia, and desperate clarifications made by clerics who never expected their private worries to outlive them. And still you walk forward, drawn deeper, ready, or as ready as anyone can be. To confront the part of the prophecy the archivists themselves rarely dare to read twice. You move into the narrower wing of the archives now, a place where even the dust seems to tread lightly, as if aware it is settling on centuries of forbidden theology, and the lamps here glow dimmer, their golden halos shrinking against the darkness like shy fireflies deciding whether to commit to appearing in tonight's narrative. The corridor bends left, then right, then left again, as though the architect had been doodling spirals after too many espressos, and soon you reach a smaller vault door reinforced with metal seems so thick you suspect they could survive a minor meteor strike. A placard beside the door reads, "Interpretative Documents, Restricted Access," which is Vatican understatement for, "This is where the real arguments begin." And as you step inside, you are greeted by a room filled not with hushed reverence, but with the lingering static of intellectual warfare. Tall shelves rise in imposing rows, each one labeled with topics like apocalyptic symbolism, prophetic language, and the suspiciously vague, miscellaneous phenomena, a category typically used by institutions when they don't want to admit something might be supernatural or embarrassing. You breathe in the scent of old vellum, warm metal, and a faint trace of lavender, which is strange because lavender is not standard Vatican archival protocol. But then again, neither is wandering into restricted prophecy rooms without a security badge. So here we all are. On a central table lies a stack of interpretative drafts of the Third Secret, each one representing a different scholar's attempt to explain a vision that already defied explanation. And you understand instantly why the Church released only one official interpretation. These pages are wild. Some describe spiritual warfare in poetic metaphors that read like medieval fan fiction. Others outline geopolitical scenarios that suspiciously resemble board games. One even proposes that humanity must prepare for a universal purification event, though it stops short of specifying whether this purification requires candles, prayer, or a giant cosmic mop. Yet one mainstream historical fact sits quietly amid the chaos. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, before becoming Pope Benedict XVI, did in fact author the commentary that accompanied the public release of the Third Secret in 2000, framing the vision as symbolic rather than predictive. A distinction scholars still love to debate because arguing about symbolism is the closest academics get to Olympic sports. You reach for a particularly thick folder marked Interpretive Variant C, which sounds like something a video game developer would name a harder difficulty mode. And when you open it, you find pages filled with dense theological language and sharp marginal notes clearly written by someone who needed more sleep. One note reads, "The symbolism of the mountain may reflect the hierarchy of the Church." Another counters, "No, mountain equals obstacle, obvious." And a third simply states, "Please remember to eat lunch." You skim further and discover a sketch labeled Hypothetical Vision Structure, which resembles a diagram drawn by someone determined to fit cosmic revelation into tidy geometry. There is a strange comfort in the messiness of it all. Even the experts couldn't agree on what the prophecy meant, which means your confusion is not only normal, but practically scholarly. And then you find the fringe tidbit tucked inside the folder's back pocket. A carbon copy of an anonymous note asserting that the true interpretation involves an event not yet revealed to humanity. A phrase vague enough to inspire 1,000 conspiracy videos and at least 4 overcaffeinated Reddit threads. The note isn't signed, written in shaky cursive, and stained with something that might be espresso or might be fear. It's hard to tell in this lighting. You fold it back into place and feel again that electric shiver at the base of your spine, the same one you felt upstairs near the candle that definitely violated Vatican fire codes. And you realize you are standing at the crossroads of conflicting interpretations, each one more unsettling than the last. Around you, the room hums with unresolved questions, restless energy, and the echoes of scholars who once argued passionately over whether humanity was being warned of war, spiritual decay, or something so metaphysical it defies categorization. This brings you to the open scholarly debate phrase that refuses to die. The symbolic interpretation is insufficient to reconcile all known accounts. Some theologians claim the vision must be metaphorical because blunt prophecy makes people panic. Others insist the symbolism is simply coded language for real-world events, though no agreement exists on which events those might be. A few fringe academics even suggest the vision may involve a spiritual transformation so profound that no earthly vocabulary can describe it accurately, which sounds poetic until you remember that people with clipboards debated this for decades. You step back from the table, letting the arguments swirl around you, and glance toward another shelf labeled Prohibited Interpretative Attempts. Now that is a label that demands investigation, like finding a drawer titled Do Not Open Unless You Enjoy Trauma. You pull out a slim dossier and discover essays banned from internal circulation, not because they were incorrect, but because they were, apparently, too imaginative. One essay proposes the secret references, a cosmic unveiling of conscience. Another describes humanity experiencing a moment of collective inner illumination. And a third attempts to reconcile the vision with scientific theories about solar phenomena, which is creative but perhaps ambitious for a document originally witnessed by children tending sheep. You can almost hear the archivist sighing across time, muttering, "Please stop giving us more problems." And yet, as you read, something clicks into place. Every interpretation, regardless of approach, circles the idea of profound transformation. Whether spiritual, political, or apocalyptic, the message feels less like a warning about a single event and more like a mirror held up to humanity's ongoing tendency to misplace its moral compass. You walk deeper into the room, your fingers brushing the spines of more folders, and feel the theories whispering at you like restless spirits begging to be understood. A draft pinned to a corkboard catches your eye. Its title reads, Unified Interpretative Hypothesis, though that confidence is immediately undermined by the 37 question marks scribbled beside it. The draft attempts to merge symbolic, literal, mystical, and historical interpretations into a single coherent explanation, but collapses halfway through into a rambling paragraph that seems to blame everything on volcanic activity, which feels like a bold narrative choice. You take a step back and inhale the comforting scent of dried ink and old theology, letting the interpretive chaos settle around you like dust, and you remember with a rueful smile the crocodile dung sunscreen from that earlier story, proof that humanity has always tried its best with the tools available, even when those tools are questionable. You turn toward the exit, the shelves now looming like silent judges, and you understand that nothing in this room offers certainty. Every interpretation is a shard of a larger truth, each reflecting some portion but never the whole. And somewhere deeper within these archives, beyond the disagreements and speculative diagrams, lies the version no one wants to write on paper, the one whispered, hidden, stored in a vault you haven't yet reached. That is where your path leads next, into the chamber where interpretations end and forbidden clarity begins. You continue down the narrowing corridor, each step carrying you further from interpretative chaos and deeper into a realm where the voices of prophets, popes, scribes, and skeptics mingle like the world's most unlikely choir, humming a melody equal parts reverent and ominous. The air grows cooler as you descend another flight of stone steps, the kind worn smooth by centuries of anxious clerics pacing during crises, both spiritual and political, and the faint scent of beeswax and incense floats toward you as if trying to soften the impact of whatever you are about to read next. A low hum echoes through the hallway, not machinery, not chanting, but something subtler, like the vibration of memory itself. And the moment you realize it's actually just an industrial dehumidifier struggling to keep ancient documents alive, the illusion breaks slightly, though not enough to diminish the atmosphere. You reach a door carved with saints so solemnly posed they seem to glare at you for trespassing, and when you nudge it open, you enter a long rectangular chamber lined with illuminated manuscripts, papal diaries, prophetic commentaries, and personal letters from figures who shaped centuries with a single sentence scribbled in haste. The room glows softly from wall-mounted lamps, their golden light pooling over the script like warm honey, and as you walk between the rows, the parchment pages rustle in a gentle airflow you hope is deliberate and not a sign that this chamber has a draft capable of flipping 1,600-year-old documents onto the floor. You pause before a display case containing a thick codex annotated by scribes during the Council of Trent, and one mainstream historical fact rises to meet you. That very council did indeed standardize much of Catholic doctrine in the mid-1500s, cementing the Church's stance on prophetic revelation, including the rule that visions should be vetted with more scrutiny than most people apply to online shopping reviews. The Codex's margins are filled with notes, eager, irritated, amused, and occasionally panicked, revealing scribes who were clearly having a long week. And you catch yourself smiling at one faded scribble reading, "No more metaphors today, please," which proves that overworked staff existed long before email. As you move deeper, you encounter shelves dedicated to early mystics who recorded visions in painstaking detail, the ink swirling across the pages like smoke, and you notice how many of them described impossible colors, unearthly music, or scenes so strange they make the Third Secret almost modest in comparison. A fragile scroll from the 800s mentions a sky split as a veil. Another speaks of a city of mirrors rising from the sea. And yet another prophet, whose handwriting looks suspiciously like someone who enjoyed dramatic flair, insists angels once communicated in a dialect known only to goats, though that last claim might require a generous interpretation. You keep walking, passing papal notes from Benedict XV to Leo XIII, and the deeper you go, the more you sense the centuries layering on your shoulders like heavy velvet, the accumulated anxiety of countless leaders who believe the end of the world might arrive before their next scheduled meeting. A soft click sounds behind you, and you turn briefly, half expecting an archivist in slippers to shuffle into view, but the hall remains empty, leaving you with nothing but silence and the faint memory of lavender clinging stubbornly to the air. You reach a cabinet secured with a lock so ornate it must have been crafted by a blacksmith who wanted to impress angels, and though it's sealed now, a small placard beside it explains its contents. Papal Reflections on Fatima from 1917 through the early 2000s. The overview alone feels like a whispered confession, outlining decades of papal concern, contemplation, rereadings, and what can only be described as holy hesitation. You open the adjacent drawer, which is thankfully not locked, and find loose-leaf notes written by popes and cardinals who struggled, sometimes aloud, sometimes in silence, with the implications of prophetic visions that insisted on veiling themselves in metaphor. One note from a mid-20th century pope describes dreams he experienced after reading the Third Secret, dreams of a world veiled in smoke and voices calling across oceans. And though he never clarified whether these dreams were symbolic or the result of late-night cheese consumption, the uncertainty hangs thick in the air. And here emerges your fringe tidbit of the evening, a tiny scrap of paper tucked between pages, written in shaky handwriting, claiming that one early pope attempted to burn a controversial interpretation of the Fatima prophecy in a fireplace, but the ashes allegedly reformed into legible text the next morning. A story so dramatic you suspect someone exaggerated it after a long night of wine and worry. Yet it's preserved here because archivists apparently file everything, including miraculous, fire-resistant paperwork. You slide the pages gently back into place, aware that your presence here is like brushing fingertips against a centuries-long nervous breakdown captured in ink. And as you straighten, the open scholarly debate phrase returns again, echoing through the manuscripts like a stubborn ghost. Prophets describe visions through the limits of their language, not the limits of reality. Scholars argue endlessly over how literally or abstractly prophetic imagery should be taken, a debate that grows especially heated after someone presents a new metaphor nobody asked for. You can practically feel the old disagreements vibrating in the air, arguments about symbols, timelines, spiritual states, and whether certain popes suppressed parts of revelations for the sake of global stability or merely to avoid unnecessary panic among the faithful. You move forward, stepping into an alcove where several papal diaries lie open beneath protective glass, and one entry catches your attention immediately. It speaks of an echo between visions across centuries, a similarity of imagery appearing in mystical experiences separated by oceans, cultures, and eras. The diary wonders aloud whether all prophets witness the same reality filtered through their own minds, or whether humanity's fears simply remain consistent enough to produce similar metaphors. The idea feels both intimate and unsettling, like realizing that every generation has stared into the same cosmic abyss, and tried to describe it without breaking into a cold sweat. You continue walking, fingers trailing along the metal railing as you pass a final row of manuscripts, and your mind drifts to earlier moments. The archivist's slippers, the flickering candle that should have been extinguished, the diagrams that made the Third Secret look like an overcomplicated board game. And each memory folds into this new understanding of how the Church wrestled with prophetic messages for centuries. You pause once more before leaving the chamber and feel the presence of all those voices behind you, the prophets and popes who interpreted, doubted, believed, feared, softened, exaggerated, or suppressed the visions entrusted to them. And as you exhale slowly, their whispers seem to converge on a single point. Whatever lies locked in the deepest vault is not merely an interpretation or a warning, but a culmination, the terminal point of centuries of visionary echoes. You take a final lingering breath of beeswax, old paper, and time itself, then step toward the final stairway, because the truth of the censored Third Secret is not in the debates, nor in the metaphors, nor in the interpretations scattered across this chamber, but in the last sealed vault where popes walked alone, prayed alone, and emerged with eyes that carried the weight of something unspeakable. You descend the final stone staircase, the air tightening around you as though the Vatican itself is holding its breath, watching to see whether you'll turn back or continue toward the vault where legends whisper the censored Third Secret truly rests. The steps grow narrower, older, as if carved long before the idea of archives existed, and a faint metallic scent rises from the depths, blending with that stubborn lavender trace you've encountered throughout this journey. Lavender that should not logically be here. Lavender that lingers like memory itself. At the bottom of the stairs you find a corridor lit not by lamps, but by recessed candles flickering in protected alcoves, their flames bobbing gently in a draft that feels more like a sigh than a breeze. You walk slowly, your fingers grazing the rough walls, and you sense a shift in atmosphere. Not danger, not urgency, but reverence, the kind that accompanies sacred things hidden away not for their danger, but for their fragility. Ahead lies a door unlike any you've seen tonight. Thick, beautiful, forged in layers of dark iron softened by time, with a lock so intricate it resembles a rosary made of gears. You inhale, feeling the heaviness of the moment settle into your bones, and place your hand upon the metal. It is warm, impossibly warm, as though hundreds of anxious palms have touched it across the decades. A soft click echoes beneath your fingertips, an invitation or a warning, difficult to tell, and the door shifts open just enough for you to slip inside. The chamber is circular, low-ceilinged, and bathed in a soft amber glow that seems to seep from nowhere and everywhere at once. The scent here is different, older, thicker, saturated with parchment, ink, wax, and something faintly sweet, perhaps beeswax blended with prayer. In the center of the room stands a pedestal of carved marble, marked by centuries of tiny scratches, like the ghosts of trembling hands unsure whether they wanted to open the envelope resting atop it. And there it is, the envelope, the one that held the Third Secret. Not the published one, not the partially revealed one, but the version scholars mutter about when they think microphones are off. It is sealed only by a thin thread, the wax long gone, and beside it lies a small silver key, ornamental, unnecessary, symbolic. You pick up the envelope gently, and it is softer than you expected, the parchment pliant with age yet still firm enough to cradle the weight of unimaginable words. As you draw a slow breath, a single mainstream historical fact rises in your memory. Pope John Paul II did indeed read the Third Secret shortly after the assassination attempt on his life in 1981, and he publicly stated that the message's symbolism resonated with his survival. But he also said the secret contained a call to conversion, a phrasing so broad it has fueled theological debates for decades, especially among those who suspect such a statement was strategic understatement. Your thumb brushes the envelope's edge, and you remember the archivist's slippers shuffling behind you earlier, the frantic marginalia in the interpretive drafts, the candle that should not have been burning, and the little note insisting the true version involves an event not yet revealed to humanity. You know now that no narrative, symbolic, literal, political, or metaphysical, has fully captured the truth held here. You untie the thread. A single sheet of parchment slides out, ink faded but unmistakably deliberate, the handwriting firm despite age. At the top is no title, no introduction, just a sentence written with such clarity it feels almost like a voice speaking across time. You read it, and though the letters are perfectly ordinary, the meaning coils through you like cold fire. The vision describes not war, not destruction, not celestial catastrophe, but a revelation of something profoundly interior, a moment when every human soul witnesses its true self reflected without distortion, without excuse, without the comfortable illusions we cradle like blankets. It is not punishment, not wrath, not divine retribution. It is recognition, a universal unveiling of conscience. A phrase repeats throughout the text, handwritten with increasing pressure as if the visionary struggled to contain the magnitude of what she saw. A light within all men, seen at the same moment, leaving none unchanged. It is strangely gentle compared to the upheaval scholars have long suspected, yet infinitely more challenging than any physical disaster. For who can hide from their own truth? You keep reading, heart steady but breath shallow, as the vision unfolds into imagery both intimate and cosmic. People across nations pause in unison as a brightness flickers behind their minds, revealing the weight of choices made without awareness. Some weep at the sight of their own compassion. Others tremble at wounds they didn't know they carried or inflicted. Cities quiet, ocean still. For one suspended instant, humanity sees itself clearly, its failures, its hope, its capacity for both ruin and redemption. There is no timeline given, no threat, no date, no consequence. Only the insistence that this unveiling will come when the world least expects, yet most needs it. This is your fringe tidbit, a small line at the bottom, half-smudged, claiming the visionary witnessed a brightness that does not burn, which some fringe scholars have theorized refers to a phenomenon now nicknamed the luminous pause, a theoretical future moment of collective introspection so profound it borders on supernatural psychology. You can almost hear those scholars arguing now, their voices rising in heated debate, shouting the open scholarly debate phrase still echoing from section 3 and 4. The prophetic message concerns not events, but interior revelation. The Vatican, with its centuries of caution, likely feared misinterpretation, feared people would panic or expect supernatural fireworks, or assume imminent apocalypse. And in fairness, humanity does have a reputation for dramatizing things. We invented doomsday cults, after all, and crocodile dung sunscreen, which still stands as a testament to our wildly creative but occasionally questionable decision-making. You lower the parchment slowly, letting its meaning settle through you like warm sand slipping through fingers. Around the chamber, the quiet deepens, becomes something close to reverence. You understand now why this version was hidden, not because it was frightening, but because it demanded something far more difficult than fear. It demanded reflection, transformation, responsibility, and transformation rarely sells as well as disaster. You place the parchment gently back on the pedestal and sit on the cool stone floor, letting your breathing steady as the chamber's amber light softens at the edges, as though dimming in respect for the secret you now carry. And it is here, in this quiet underground vault, surrounded by centuries of anxiety, interpretation, devotion, panic, hope, lavender-scented mystery, and far too many documents annotated by sleep-deprived clerics, that the final stretch of your journey settles into a different rhythm, slower, softer, drifting toward stillness. Your eyes trace the flicker of the candles, their flames bending like slow exhalations, and the chamber begins to feel less like a vault and more like a cradle of silence. You lean back against the stones worn smooth by time, letting the coolness seep into your shoulders as the story eases from revelation into rest. The walls no longer watch you with curiosity, but with something closer to calm acceptance, as if acknowledging that you have gone further than most, deeper than the archivists in slippers, past the frantic diagrams and the scribbled warnings, beyond the official narratives and scholarly disagreements. The envelope sits quietly, thin, weightless, no longer a threat or a puzzle, but a whisper of something humanity has always known in its quieter moments. That the greatest changes come not from falling fire or thunderous signs, but from the gentler, quieter unveiling of the self. You close your eyes, allowing the warm amber to fade into darkness behind your lids, your breathing slowing as the chamber settles into stillness. You feel a softness spreading through your limbs, a loosening of thought, a dissolving of tension you didn't realize you carried. The story drifts now, as all bedtime stories must, into a space where images blur into one another. The lavender in the air, the candle upstairs flickering against forbidden pages, the archivist shuffling in soft slippers, the looping handwriting, the whisper of conscience made visible, the weight and weightlessness of truth reflected clearly for just a moment before fading again into the gentle dark. Everything quiets, everything softens, everything dims, and as the last traces of the vision drift like dust through your mind, you feel yourself sinking into that warm, velvety darkness where thought dissolves and breath becomes slow and sweet, the kind of darkness that holds you, comforts you, reassures you without needing any words at all. The vault, the steps, the parchment, the centuries, they all ease away, leaving only calm, only softness, only the quiet reassurance that mysteries need not be frightening to be powerful, and that the most profound revelations often arrive not with noise, but with silence. And so you rest now, floating gently in the hush that follows truth, letting the world blur at the edges, letting your breath slow, letting sleep settle like a warm cloak drawn softly around your shoulders as the last candle flickers low and fades.